Philozoopia.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're unlocking a secret. Imagine a monumental book, hand-bound in crimson leather, its pages filled with intricate, dreamlike art and sweeping, deeply personal prose. For decades, it was kept under lock and key, a private odyssey into the most untamed territories of the human psyche, a journey that ultimately reshaped modern thought and our understanding of what lies beneath the surface of consciousness.
Yeah.
This is the incredible, compelling story of Carl Gustav Jung's Liber Novus, famously known to the world as the Red Book.
It truly is a singular document, isn't it? A raw, almost shocking encounter with the unconscious that very few thinkers have ever dared to undertake so directly.
Right.
For over half a century, it remained hidden, known only to a select few in Jung's closest circle. Its eventual public release was, quite rightly, a monumental event in the world of psychology and beyond, opening a window into the very crucible of Jung's revolutionary ideas.
And in this deep dive, that's precisely our mission. We're going beyond the myth, the rumors, and the whispers to truly unpack the origins of this extraordinary document.
Yeah, get into the real substance.
We'll delve into its core themes, meet the enigmatic figures that populated Jung's inner world, and explore the profound, transformative impact it had, not just on Jung's own life and work, but by extension on our collective understanding of the human mind. It's a journey into those wild, often unsettling territories, very much like Jung's own, but we're here to guide you through it.
And what's truly fascinating here for you, our listener, is that whether you're someone who is intensely curious about the intricate workings of the mind, or perhaps you find yourself grappling with complex ideas and paradoxes in your own life.
Or maybe just looking for that insight.
Or maybe you're simply looking for that powerful aha moment that brings clarity to something profound and seemingly ungraspable. This deep dive offers a unique shortcut. It's a way to become truly well-informed about one of the 20th century's most influential thinkers and a singular human experiment in confronting the unknown within.
So get ready. We are going deep. To truly appreciate the audacious undertaking that the Red Book represents, we have to start at the very beginning, understanding the formative years that shaped Jung's singular mind. Even in his childhood, there were early, undeniable glimpses of this remarkably rich inner world.
Absolutely. His earliest experiences weren't just curious anecdotes. They laid a profound groundwork for his later life and work. Jung himself recalled, for instance, a vivid visual hallucination he had as a boy.
Oh yeah, what was that?
He would gaze intently at a portrait of his maternal grandmother, a stern figure, until, in his mind's eye, he saw his grandfather actually descending the stairs within the portrait.
Wow, that's intense for a kid.
It really is. And this wasn't just a child's vivid imagination, it was something more. It suggested an innate, almost uncanny capacity for intense internal imagery, and crucially, a rather permeable boundary between his inner subjective reality and the outer objective world.
Like the line was blurred for him.
Yeah, exactly. The kind of clear-cut boundary most people rigidly maintain, Jung seemed to naturally cross. This early experience foreshadowed his later development of active imagination, where he would intentionally engage with these inner figures, allowing them to unfold and reveal their meaning, almost like having a conscious dialogue with aspects of his unconscious.
That's truly fascinating to have such an experience so early on. But then there's this truly shocking, almost infamous incident, what he famously called the terrible sinful thought. This sounds like it left a profound mark.
Oh, it left an indelible mark, one he revisited throughout his life as a foundational moment. This occurred when he was around 12 years old, walking through the Münsterplatz in Basel.
Right, in Switzerland?
Yes, he was admiring the sun glinting off the cathedral's newly restored glazed roof tiles when he felt this profound, terrible thought approaching, almost as if it were a physical presence.
Like an external force.
Almost, yeah. He tried desperately to push it away for days, filled with anguish and fear. He wrestled with it, thinking, how could I, a pious boy, think such a thing? But eventually, a crucial shift happened.
What changed?
He convinced himself that perhaps it was God himself who wanted him to think this thought. Much like in the biblical narrative, God had supposedly wanted Adam and Eve to transgress in the Garden of Eden, a kind of divine test, perhaps.
And the thought itself, it's quite, well, it's startling. What exactly was it?
He imagined God on his throne, high above, unleashing an almighty turd directly onto the cathedral, utterly shattering its beautiful new roof and smashing the entire building into rubble.
Good heavens.
Yeah. And the immediate aftermath for Jung wasn't shame or self-loathing, but rather an immense, indescribable sense of bliss and relief, a feeling he had never experienced before. It was a profound release from the internal struggle.
That is certainly a vision. What was the deeper significance for him? It sounds like a moment of radical personal revelation, not just shock value.
Exactly. For Jung, this wasn't mere blasphemy or a childish fantasy. It was a direct, immediate, and deeply personal encounter with what he called a living God who stands omnipotent and free above the Bible and church.
So, a God beyond human rules and institutions.
Precisely. A God unconstrained by human dogma or institutional religion. This internal, visceral connection to the divine was something he felt his own father, a pastor bound by tradition and theological constraints, sorely lacked.
That comparison is telling.
It is. Jung felt this moment marked the beginning of his real responsibility, a profound, independent, and unmediated relationship with the divine, bypassing established religious institutions and external authority.
So it wasn't just rebellion.
No, the key insight here isn't just Jung's personal rebellion. It's a foundational moment that reveals his radical commitment to personal truth over any external dogma or institution, foreshadowing his entire approach to psychology where inner experience takes precedence. These childhood experiences weren't just fleeting fantasies. They were foundational moments that shaped his lifelong fascination with and unique approach to the psyche and the divine, emphasizing an intensely personal internal connection over any rigid external creed.
So even as a young boy, he was already charting his own independent course in this inner landscape. And this rich inner life was also fueled by a voracious intellectual appetite that seemed to grasp complexities early on.
Precisely. Around the same time, his passion for reading truly ignited. He wasn't just reading anything. He was drawn to works that grappled with the darker, more paradoxical aspects of existence.
Like what, for example?
He was particularly struck by Goethe's monumental work, Faust, and what impressed him most was how Goethe took the figure of the devil, Mephistopheles, seriously.
Not just a cartoon villain.
Not at all. Not as a mere caricature of evil, but as a dynamic, intelligent force to be reckoned with. This resonated deeply with Jung's own burgeoning understanding of the necessity of confronting and integrating the dark shadow aspects of the psyche, rather than simply repressing or denying them. It showed him that profound truths could be found even in the most unsettling figures.
And it wasn't just literature, but philosophy as well that shapes this developing mind.
Yes, the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer made a particularly significant impression. Jung appreciated Schopenhauer's unflinching willingness to acknowledge the existence of evil and suffering in the world, and to give voice to the world's miseries without flinching.
He didn't shy away from the tough stuff.
No, he didn't. And this philosophical grounding prepared Jung to look at the darker, more uncomfortable, and often irrational truths of existence, something that would be absolutely crucial for his later work on the Red Book and his concept of the shadow. It validated his own intuitive sense that life was not just light.
He also had this intriguing concept of himself as a dual personality, even as a young man, didn't he? Almost as if he had two distinct modes of being.
He did. He felt a strong, almost uncanny sense of duality within himself, describing himself as living in two centuries simultaneously and manifesting two alternating personalities, which he famously dubbed number 1 and number 2.
No one.
Yeah. And this number wasn't just a quirky self-description. It was an early intuitive grasp of the multifaceted nature of the self, hinting at what he would later develop as the persona, the social mask we present to the world, and the concept of psychic complexes. He was already aware of the different layers of his own being and how they interacted long before he formalized these ideas.
It's important to remember that Jung's unique, deeply personal journey didn't happen in a vacuum. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a remarkably fertile ground for these kinds of inquiries, particularly with the widespread rise of modern spiritualism.
Oh, definitely.
This broader context helps us understand why Jung's later explorations, while unique, weren't entirely isolated.
That's a crucial historical and cultural point. The latter half of the 19th century saw modern spiritualism sweep across Europe and America. Phenomena like trances, glossolalia, which is speaking in tongues,
Right.
automatic writing, And crystal vision became surprisingly widespread and popular, not just among eccentrics, but across society.
Really? So it wasn't just a fringe thing?
Not entirely, and what's particularly significant is that these weren't just fringe activities. They genuinely captured the attention of leading scientists of the day. Figures like Sir William Crookes and Alfred Russel Wallace, co-discoverer of evolution, they saw these phenomena as legitimate subjects for scientific inquiry, believing they might reveal new laws of nature.
And also prominent psychologists at the time, I understand,
Yeah.
not just the physicists and biologists.
Absolutely. Influential figures like Sigmund Freud, the American philosopher and psychologist William James, Frederick Myers, Pierre Janet, and Theodore Flournoy, they were all seriously interested in these phenomena.
Freud, too. That's interesting.
Yes. They observed, investigated, and even experimented with mediums and spiritualist practices, trying to understand their psychological basis. This societal context is vital because it illustrates that Jung's later deep exploration of the unconscious and its autonomous manifestations, his inner visions and dialogues, while profoundly personal and unique, also occurred within a broader cultural and intellectual milieu that was actively grappling with the non-rational, the unseen, and the mysterious aspects of existence.
So he wasn't working in total isolation.
No, he wasn't entirely alone on this path. There was a collective curiosity and intellectual ferment around these elusive dimensions of the human experience.
Building on that remarkable foundation of a deeply intuitive and intellectually hungry young man, let's turn to part 2. The genesis of Liber Novus itself. Jung's profound, deliberate journey inward. We know he became quite disenchanted with the conventional psychiatric and psychoanalytic approaches that dominated his early career.
That's a critical turning point. He grew increasingly frustrated by what he saw as the severe limitations of the prevailing experimental and statistical methods in psychiatry and psychology.
Too rigid, too clinical.
For Jung, yes. These approaches felt too reductive, too impersonal to capture the immense complexity, the unique individual experience, and the deeper spiritual dimensions of the human psyche. They simply weren't getting to the heart of the matter, you know?
So he shifted his focus. How did that manifest in his clinical practice and research at the Berkholzli Hospital?
Well, his work with hypnotic demonstrations at the Berkholzli outpatient clinic was absolutely pivotal. It wasn't just about symptom relief. It shifted his interest fundamentally toward therapeutics, but more importantly, toward using the clinical encounter itself as a direct, immersive method of research.
So the therapy room became the lab, in a way.
In a very real way, yes. For Jung, the patient's inner world, revealed through these direct, often non-rational engagements, became the true laboratory for understanding the psyche. He realized that the human experience couldn't be quantified or neatly categorized. It had to be met on its own terms.
And this independent trajectory brings us to an important clarification. The so-called Freudocentric legend that sometimes overshadows Jung's independent intellectual development. There's a common misconception that Jung was simply Freud's protege who then branched off.
That's a vital point to address for historical accuracy and to understand Jung's true originality. While he did begin communicating with Freud in 1906 and their early relationship was deeply significant, Jung consistently protested the popular narrative that viewed Freud and psychoanalysis as the sole or even primary source of his groundbreaking work.
He pushed back against that idea.
Strongly. He explicitly stated in an unpublished article from the 1930s and later in his memoirs, "I in no way exclusively stem from Freud. I had my scientific attitude and the theory of complexes before I met Freud." And he credited others. The teachers that influenced me above all are Bleuler, Pierre Janet, and Theodore Flournoy. This isn't just a historical footnote. It marks a crucial internal and external pivot, where Jung consciously and deliberately moved away from established external methodologies to embrace a more direct, subjective, and holistic approach to the psyche, a path he had already begun forging long before Freud. He was always an independent mind.
So he truly forged his own distinct path, leading him, it seems, to what he called the intoxication of mythology. It sounds like a deeply immersive period of discovery.
It was an all-consuming passion. In 1909, Jung made a bold move. He resigned from his demanding position at the Berkholzli to dedicate himself fully to his growing private practice and, critically, to his burgeoning research interests.
A big leap.
A huge leap. This period coincided with a significant and deliberate shift in his focus towards the profound study of mythology, folklore, and religion from cultures all around the world. He wasn't just dabbling. He amassed a vast private library of scholarly works, immersing himself in these subjects, which he deeply felt was a return to his own intellectual and cultural roots, connecting him to something deeper than just clinical observation.
And this deep dive into universal stories culminated in a major academic work, didn't it? One that was central to his break with Freud, in fact.
Yes, his extensive research in this area culminated in Transformations and Symbols of the Libido, published in 2 parts in 1911 and 1912. He found this mythological work incredibly exciting and intoxicating, a word he used to convey the profound intensity of his engagement.
Intoxicating, that says a lot.
It really does. He vividly recalled in 1925 that it seemed to me I was living in an insane asylum of my own making.
Oh.
Yeah, he said, I went about with all these fantastic figures, centaurs, nymphs, satyrs, gods and goddesses, as though they were patients and I was analyzing them. I read a Greek or a Negro myth as if a lunatic were telling me his anamnesis. This raw, evocative quote truly captures the immersive and almost overwhelming nature of his intellectual and psychic engagement during this period.
And this intense scholarly and personal exploration was also part of a larger intellectual movement at the time, underscoring that Jung wasn't entirely alone in this kind of thinking.
Precisely. The end of the 19th and early 20th centuries had witnessed an explosion of scholarship in comparative religion and ethnopsychology. Scholars were collecting and translating primary religious and mythological texts from diverse cultures for the first time, making them accessible to a wider audience.
So people were suddenly seeing all these different traditions side by side.
Exactly. This unprecedented access led to what was called a relativization of the Christian worldview for many, as they saw the profound similarities and differences in human spiritual expression across the globe. This intellectual climate provided a fertile ground for Jung's deep personal exploration of these universal human experiences and their psychological significance. He was part of a generation grappling with a newly expanded view of human spirituality.
And then, in autumn 1913, following this period of intense research and personal questioning, the actual genesis of Liber Novus began, in a rather unassuming brown notebook.
That's when Jung picked up a brown notebook that he had actually set aside years earlier, back in 1902, and began writing in it. He started meticulously recording his inner states and visions, often using poetic metaphors, for instance, describing consciousness as a desert under an unbearably hot sun, a stark and lonely landscape.
Not just diary entries, then.
No, far from it. He described this process not as writing autobiographical material, but not as an autobiography, which is a crucial distinction. Instead, he adopted a dialogical form reminiscent of ancient Platonic dialogues or St. Augustine's soliloquies. It was an elaborate, ongoing inner conversation, an exchange with figures from within his own psyche.
And who, primarily, was he conversing with in this deeply personal, almost sacred act of writing?
He believed this powerful inner voice was the soul in the primitive sense, which he came to call the anima.
The anima, right, his inner feminine.
Yes. This wasn't just a metaphorical voice. It was a deeply personal, active engagement with an autonomous aspect of his own psyche specifically, his inner feminine principle. He felt he was writing letters to my anima that is part of myself with a different viewpoint from my own.
Like getting another perspective from within.
Precisely. He said, I got remarks of a new character. I was in analysis with a ghost and a woman. Retrospectively, he connected this intensely personal inner experience to a Dutch patient he had, Maria Moltzer, who held the view that the unconscious was art, while Jung, at that time, maintained it was nature.
Interesting tension there.
It is. This wasn't merely journaling or passive reflection. It was an active, intentional, and often demanding engagement with autonomous psychic contents, an exploration of his relationship with his inner feminine principle, which would become a cornerstone of his psychology. It was a conscious surrender to the demands of the unconscious.
Now, a truly pivotal moment that catalyzed the full compilation of Liber Novus was an event of collective catastrophe. The onset of World War I, which Jung had uncanny, deeply disturbing premonitions about.
This is one of the most striking and synchronistic episodes in Jung's personal history, directly linking his inner experience to global events. In June and early July 1914, Jung had the exact same dream 3 times in quick succession.
The same dream 3 times.
Yes. In these dreams, he found himself in a foreign land when suddenly, in the middle of summer, a terrible cold descended from space. All seas and rivers froze solid, and every living green thing turned to ice. It was a desolate, frozen landscape.
Chilling. And the third dream had something extra.
Yes. In the third dream, a crucial detail emerged. A leaf-bearing but fruitless tree in his homeland had its leaves transform into sweet grapes full of healing juice through the frost, which he then picked and gave them to a waiting throng. A glimmer of hope, maybe?
And the timing of these dreams was chillingly precise with the real-world events, wasn't it? It must have been profoundly unsettling.
They coincided with almost unnerving accuracy. The dreams occurred just before and immediately after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on June 28th, which ignited the spark of World War I.
The trigger event.
Exactly, and then the final dream occurred precisely around August 1st, the official outbreak of the war. Jung recalled feeling as if he was experiencing an overcompensated psychosis, a psychological state of immense internal tension and fear, bordering on madness until August 1st.
He thought he was losing his mind.
He genuinely feared it. He was even preparing a lecture on schizophrenia at the time and feared he was going mad, thinking to himself, I'll be speaking of myself. Very likely I'll go mad after reading out this paper. He felt overwhelmed by the intensity of his inner world.
But the war's outbreak provided the key, the terrifying external validation, to his big dream.
Exactly. When the war finally broke out, he suddenly understood with crystal clarity. His fantasy had not depicted what would happen to him, but rather what was about to happen to Europe on a grand, devastating scale.
So it wasn't personal, it was collective.
That was his realization. He realized these were precognitions of a collective event, what he would later call big dreams. Dreams that tap into universal archetypal patterns and collective psychic currents rather than merely individual concerns. This realization was absolutely crucial. It showed him his fear of personal madness was misplaced, and it gave him the profound courage and validation he needed to proceed fully with the compilation of Liber Novus.
So the war actually helped him commit to it.
In a way, yes, as he later stated, with sober reflection. Had war not been declared, Liber Novus would in all likelihood not have been compiled.
So he essentially integrated this immense, terrifying inner material, which for others might have led to a breakdown or psychosis. He managed to contain it.
He did, and this became a central insight for his work. He later commented that the reason why the involvement looks very much like a psychosis is that the patient is integrating the same fantasy material to which the insane person falls victim because he cannot integrate it but is swallowed up by it.
Right, the difference is integration versus being overwhelmed.
Precisely. This deep psychological insight not only validated his own intense, often harrowing process, but also fundamentally revised his therapeutic approach. It highlighted the critical importance of actively confronting, containing, and integrating such powerful psychic experiences, rather than allowing them to overwhelm or fragment the ego. It's about meeting the unconscious head-on with purpose.
And his exploration wasn't just textual or theoretical. It was profoundly artistic, reflecting the intense creative ferment within his own intellectual circle in Zurich at the time. The visual aspect of the Red Book is truly as striking as the text.
Oh, absolutely. The visual dimension of the Red Book is inseparable from its meaning. Jung's paintings and illuminations within Liber Novus aren't just illustrations, they are integral to the work, directly emerging from his active imagination.
You can really see that.
Yeah. They show strong echoes of the symbolist art movement, particularly the dreamlike, often unsettling work of Odilon Redon, and also the deep impression made by his 1910 bicycle tour of northern Italy, where he visited Ravenna.
Ravenna with the mosaics.
Exactly. The ancient frescoes and mosaics there, with their strong, vibrant colors, mosaic-like forms, and two-dimensional figures lacking conventional perspective, clearly influenced his unique visual style. It's not realistic, it's symbolic.
So his intensely personal self-explorations weren't happening in artistic or intellectual isolation. There was a collective interest in this kind of inner work through creative expression within his circle.
That's a key, often overlooked point. His self-explorations didn't occur in a vacuum. His colleagues and students in Zurich were also highly interested in art and painting as a means of exploring and giving form to the inner world.
Like who, for instance?
For example, Alphonse Mader experienced and recorded visions. Hans Schmid, another colleague, wrote and painted his fantasies in a style strikingly akin to Liber Novus.
Really? Another Red Book, almost.
In a way, yes. And Maria Molzer, his patient and colleague, who Jung retrospectively linked to his anima dialogue, actively sought to increase artistic activities within the Zurich school, considering Franz Ricklin, a painter and Jung's colleague, as a model. Molzer herself kept a Bible with pictures and writings, and even recommended the practice to her patients.
So it was a shared exploration, in a sense.
It demonstrates a collective engagement with inner worlds through creative expression, making Jung's intensely personal project part of a broader, though still avant-garde, intellectual and artistic movement of the time. They were all pioneers in mapping the unconscious.
Now let's move into the very heart of the Red Book. The direct conversations Jung had with the depths of his own psyche, encountering fascinating, often disturbing key figures and wrestling with truly profound insights. One of the most significant early sections that emerges from this period is the Septem Sermones ad Mortuos, or Seven Sermons to the Dead.
Right, the Seven Sermons. This profound work, which Jung later published privately to a small circle, was written over just 3 incredibly intense evenings in January 1914.
3 evenings, wow.
Yeah, it was a culmination of the initial fantasies and visions of this period. It's described as a psychological cosmology cast in the form of a Gnostic creation myth.
Okay, Gnostic creation myth. Can you unpack that a bit for us?
Yeah.
Sure. Essentially, it's a type of spiritual narrative that explores the universe's origins and spiritual realities through a lens of, well, hidden knowledge gnosis and a deep awareness of both light and dark, often contradictory principles existing together.
Got it. And how did this specific work emerge?
It emerged after the dead, literal, shadowy figures appeared to Jung in a fantasy, proclaiming they were going to Jerusalem to pray at the holiest graves, implying their journey for knowledge or redemption had been unsuccessful and they were still seeking answers. They needed something from the living.
And within these 7 sermons, a new, very complex, and utterly paradoxical deity is introduced, Abraxas. This isn't your typical god, is it?
No, not at all. Jung's inner soul, his anima, told him a new god was born in his soul, the god who is the son of the frogs, Abraxas.
Son of the frogs.
Yes, symbolically, of course. Jung understood this symbolically, not literally, as an emergent force within the psyche. Abraxas is described as the god who is difficult to grasp. His power is greatest because man does not see it.
Hidden power.
Exactly. And what's truly remarkable and central to Jung's understanding of paradox is Abraxas's paradoxical nature. He draws summum bonum, supreme good from the sun, and infinem malum, infinite evil, from the devil.
Both good and evil.
Both. But from himself, Abraxas draws life, altogether indefinite, the mother of good and evil. This isn't just a mystical figure. Abraxas represents a profound psychological insight into the nature of paradox itself, the union of opposites.
So a god that embodies and reconciles all opposites, good and evil, light and dark, creation and destruction. How does Jung suggest we relate to such a deity or such a principle? It seems impossible to grasp fully.
And that's the point. Abraxas is to be known but not understood. This is a crucial distinction. Jung warns that if you understand him, then you can say that he is this or that and this and not that. Thus you hold him in the hollow of your hand and therefore your hand must throw him away.
So trying to define him limits him.
Precisely. It implies that intellectual comprehension, while valuable, often limits true knowing. When we try to neatly categorize complex realities, we often diminish them, losing their inherent essence and power. The real wisdom, the deeper knowing, lies in accepting their inherent contradictions and embracing their mystery.
A difficult task.
Very. Abraxas is described as the sun, and at the same time the eternally sucking gorge of emptiness, of the diminisher and dismemberer, of the devil. It's a truly unsettling yet powerful image of a force that encompasses all of life's terrifying wholeness.
And what about the dead themselves? Why were they besieging Jung, seeking answers from him? This feels like a deeply symbolic representation of unresolved issues.
It really does. Jung later explained to his colleague Agnella Jaffe that the dead were voices of the unanswered, unresolved, and unredeemed, still needing answers from the living.
They hadn't found peace.
Apparently not. They hadn't gained knowledge or resolution through death and still encroached on life, much like the concept found in Chinese ancestor worship, where the living must tend to the needs of the deceased.
That's a strong parallel.
And one of the dead explicitly states, in a profoundly relevant message for our time, "We are a blinded race. We live only on the surface, only in the present, and think only of tomorrow. We deal roughly with the past in that we do not accept the dead."
Wow. That hits home.
Doesn't it? This segment marks a central shift in the Red Book, moving from Jung's intensely personal visions to a broader, almost collective cosmology, powerfully highlighting the idea that unresolved collective and indeed personal issues, trauma, or unlived potentials from the past demand urgent attention and integration in the present. If we ignore them, they will continue to haunt us.
Beyond Abraxas and the demanding dead, The Red Book is populated by an entire cast of enigmatic, almost mythical figures with whom Jung engages in profound, often challenging dialogues. Who are some of these central figures?
Among the most prominent and influential is Philemon.
Philemon, right.
Yes.
A wise old man with wings.
That's him. A wise old man with the wings of a kingfisher. Jung felt Philemon intoxicated me and given me a language that was foreign to me and of a different sensitivity, suggesting Philemon spoke to a deeper, more artistic part of him.
So Philemon gave him words, a language.
He believed so, yes. He believed Philemon gave him much of the earlier part of this book, literally guiding his pen. Philemon later took on the significance of a wise guide, the very personification of the formative instinct akin to the Greek god Apollo, who gives form and law to the otherwise chaotic elements of the collective unconscious.
Bringing order to the chaos.
In a way. And he appears and disappears by touching the earth, symbolizing his deep connection to grounded wisdom and the concrete manifestation of ideas. Philemon provides the intellectual framework, the conceptual language for the profound, often chaotic, ideas bubbling up from the unconscious.
And then there's Ka, Philemon's counterpart, almost his shadow, representing a very different aspect of the unconscious.
Exactly. Ka is described as the other side of Ha, his soul, with eyes of pure gold, and his body is of black iron.
Gold eyes, iron body. Striking image.
Very. Ka is presented as the essence of all magic, which, paradoxically, is love. He built a temple as a prison and grave for the gods, which Jung understood as the human tendency to solidify abstract spiritual meaning into rigid material forms, often limiting or misprisoning its true fluid essence.
Like trapping spirit in matter.
Something like that. Ka is seen as Philemon's shadow figure, embodying Dionysian qualities, raw sensation, and the power of the material world. If Philemon formulates the ideas, Ka gives them substance and brings them into manifestation. He is sensation, grounding, and the power of magic, while Philemon is intuition, wisdom, and formulation. Together, they represent a complete psychic polarity.
And Jung also directly confronts what he calls the Red One, a figure very much like the devil or a formidable adversary. This must have been a terrifying encounter.
It was a deeply unsettling yet essential confrontation. Jung encounters the Red One, who sounds cool and sneering and is associated with the Black School of Salerno, a place of pernicious arts. This is direct engagement with the dark adversarial principle within.
So, facing his own inner darkness.
Absolutely. Jung's inner dialogue with the Red One suggests that taking the devil seriously doesn't mean going over to his side or succumbing to evil, but rather courageously confronting one's other standpoint, accepting the adversary within oneself.
Acknowledging it's part of you.
Yes. And the Red One even reveals a profound paradox. He, too, fell into your snare and went to a monastery, hinting at the idea that opposites often contain elements of each other, and that even what seems purely evil can have its own strange, inverted path to the divine, or to integration. It's about recognizing the internal source of what we project as external evil.
There's also the anchorite, a solitary figure Jung encounters in a stark desert landscape. What wisdom does this figure offer?
This clever saint in the desert understands a profound truth. The immense fullness and immense emptiness are one and the same.
Fullness and emptiness are the same. That's a paradox.
A deep one. He speaks of unlearning, a particularly difficult, even painful process for someone like Jung, who is a highly successful academic, teacher, and scholar. To unlearn means to shed preconceived notions, establish knowledge, and even one's identity as an expert.
Letting go of what you think you know.
Exactly. The anchorite's example implies that embracing solitude and the arduous process of unlearning allows one to experience life's deepest paradoxes and move beyond conventional intellectual understanding into a more direct existential knowing. It's about emptying oneself to make space for something new.
These encounters and dialogues, particularly with the Red One and Philemon, lead to what feels like the very core dialogue of the entire book. Jung's confrontation and eventual unification with his soul, his anima, which he had lost touch with.
It's truly the central, profound narrative arc of the Red Book. Jung recounts how, after wandering for many years, feeling disconnected, forgetting he possessed a soul, which meant he was disconnected from his deep inner being, his true self, he eventually finds her behind all events, the unseen force animating his life.
She was there all along.
Yes. Initially, he finds her in images within men, through his clinical work and studies, and then she appears to him directly, climbing out of a dark shaft, speaking to him in dreams, and urging him to rise above myself. It's a call to profound self-transcendence.
And this soul, this anima, seems to relentlessly push him toward a new spiritual path, a new religion, even when he's hesitant or fearful.
Yes, the soul is a demanding guide. She pushes him explicitly towards a higher level of consciousness and the proclamation of a new religion. Jung, as a pragmatic psychologist, expresses profound fear and hesitation about publishing this deeply personal and unconventional material.
Understandably.
Right. To which the soul asks, "Why have you received the revelation? You should not hide it." The soul states her desire to rule alone within him and asserts her right comes from serving Jung and his calling, his unique destiny. It's the inner truth demanding expression.
He also has to overcome a deep self-scorn, a sense of his own inadequacy during this incredibly vulnerable process.
He does. Jung confesses to suffering from his own scorn, believing his hands were empty, that he had nothing truly valuable to offer. The soul challenges his vanity directly, almost brutally. Do you still not know that you are not writing a book to feed your vanity, but that you are speaking with me?
Oof. Tough love from the soul.
Very tough. This confrontation, this stripping away of ego-driven ambition, is a pivotal moment, allowing him to see the desert becoming green, symbolizing renewed inner life, creativity, and purpose flowing back into his being. It's the barrenness giving way to fertility.
And then one of the most vivid, shocking, and disturbing parts of the book, the descent into hell, guided by the prophet Elijah and encountering Salome. This sounds like a truly harrowing experience.
It is arguably the most psychologically intense segment. Jung descends into a dreadful deep, filled with many voices and a palpable sense of chaos. He is led by Elijah, the ancient prophet, who represents logos, or the principle of thought, rational understanding, and spiritual authority.
The thinking principle.
Yes. And here in the depths, he encounters Salome, Elijah's blind daughter, who embodies eros, or the principle of pleasure, feeling, and instinctual, often dangerous, passion.
Eros, the feeling, instinctual side.
Exactly. Salome is strikingly described as a tiger with hands stained with the blood of the Holy One, evoking images of primal violence, murder, and even incestuous pleasure, the utterly raw, untamed aspects of the psyche.
Terrifying imagery.
Deeply. Jung feels a deep dread in her presence, an instinctive recoil, but also a strange, inevitable sense of love for her, as she tells him chillingly, "You will love me."
You will love me.
Wow.
And the shocking, almost unbearable realization that follows this encounter with Salome.
The shocking realization is that Salome, this terrifying instinctual figure, is one with the prophet, one with John, but also one with me, and then explicitly reveals herself as your soul.
His soul is this terrifying figure.
That's the revelation. It is profoundly unsettling and transformative. It forces Jung to confront the dark, feared, irrational, and instinctual aspects within his own psyche that are, paradoxically, an intrinsic part of his soul, his deepest self. It means the very source of his wisdom and guidance is also the set of primal urges and terrifying shadow material.
This descent culminates in a highly symbolic and deeply disturbing vision, arguably the most important: the murder of the hero Siegfried. This sounds like a necessary, albeit brutal, act for psychic transformation.
It's a pivotal moment. In this vision, Jung finds himself with a youth lurking to murder Siegfried, who approaches on a chariot made of bones, a stark image of death and decay.
A chariot of bones.
Yeah. They proceed to kill Siegfried, a figure whom Jung understands as representing an ideal of force and efficiency, essentially, the dominant, successful, heroic ego function, often associated with his own powerful intellect and ambition.
Killing his own heroic ideal.
Exactly. This brutal act leads to a rain, which he interprets as a profound release of tension and an enormous pity that washes over him. Jung understood this as the deliberate, symbolic sacrifice of his superior function, his highly developed intellect, in order to activate his inferior functions, the less developed, often repressed parts of his personality, like feeling or sensation. It was a conscious humbling, a dismantling of his own heroic ideal.
And this deeply personal inner event was directly linked, in Jung's mind, to the collective catastrophe of World War I, wasn't it? It's a powerful synchronicity.
It was an undeniable synchronicity for him, one of the most powerful connections between individual and collective experience in the Red Book. Jung explicitly connects this inner murder of Siegfried, the heroic ideal, to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, seeing it as a precognition of a collective event where the prince in us, the hero, is threatened.
The inner mirrors the outer.
Yes. The death of the hero in the individual psyche, the sacrifice of the ego's cherished ideals and superior functions, is mirrored by the collective event of war, the collapse of old orders and values in Europe. This powerfully illustrates Jung's central idea of the deep, often terrifying connection between the individual psyche and world events, where inner conflicts can manifest on a global stage.
The journey then culminates in Salome's chilling demand for atonement, an act of ritualistic integration that is deeply visceral and disturbing.
Yes, for the murder implicitly of the hero figure, but also broadly, a collective human sin, the sin of separation, and the denial of one's own shadow. She tells Jung with unwavering severity, "You are a man, and a man has committed this deed." She demands that he abase yourself and eat the liver of the slain hero.
Eat the liver, my goodness.
It's intensely visceral. Jung's compliance is horrified, a raw act of submission, swallowing with desperate efforts, experiencing a dull, sweet taste of blood until the horror is accomplished. It's an act of deep, sickening integration.
And then what happens after this act?
Immediately after, in a moment of profound transformation, Salome throws back her veil, revealing herself not as a terrifying monster, but as a beautiful maiden with ginger hair, and explicitly states, with warmth, "I am your soul."
So the horror transforms into beauty, into the soul revealed.
Exactly. It's a truly radical act of integration, isn't it? Accepting the most abhorrent parts of oneself. It reminds me of the ancient philosophical idea that nothing human is alien to me.
It is absolutely radical. The core insight here, as Jung later noted in his memoir Protocols, is indeed the ancient Roman playwright Terence's maxim, nil humanum a me alienum esse puto. Nothing human is alien to me.
Nothing human is alien.
It implies the absolute necessity of accepting and integrating even the most horrifying, despised, or evil parts of oneself as essential for wholeness and growth. It's a refusal to disown any part of the human experience, even the darkest, most primitive urges, because those disowned parts will simply operate from the shadows, causing unconscious harm. True healing and growth come from embracing the totality of who you are.
This journey into the depths, then, brings us to Jung's radical embrace of the paradox of opposites and the demanding, often counterintuitive nature of the inner way. He suggests that even good can become something negative if clung to rigidly.
That's one of the most challenging yet liberating insights from the Red Book. After these intense experiences, Jung describes experiencing a literal civil war within himself, struggling with his soul's seemingly hollow words and the mask of the banal, the temptation to revert to superficiality.
The pull back to the ordinary.
Yes. And he learns a profound lesson. Everything that becomes too old becomes evil, including one's highest ideals, if they become rigid and unable to adapt. He references the suffering of the crucified God that one can also betray and crucify God, namely the God of the old year.
So even our highest values need renewal.
It implies that even one's most cherished values and guiding principles, if they become absolute and static, must sometimes be sacrificed or transformed to allow for new life, new understanding, and new growth. It's a call to dynamic rather than static morality.
So even what we perceive as good can become a hindrance to further psychological or spiritual development if it's clung to too tightly. It's like the shadow side of virtue.
Precisely. The soul insists, with an almost terrifying demand, I must submit to what I fear. Yes, even more, that I must even love what horrifies me.
Love what horrifies you.
This is where the integration becomes truly uncomfortable. She draws a startling analogy to a medieval saint who, disgusted by the pus from plague infections, forced himself to drink it and found that it smelled like roses. This highlights the paradoxical path of psychological integration. What you resist most, what you find most repulsive, often holds the key to your growth, healing, and a deeper, more profound acceptance of reality. It's about finding the sacred in the profane.
And this path of confrontation and integration often leads to a kind of desolate space, a psychological desert, where one must endure solitude.
Jung is indeed led to the place of the soul, which he describes as the desert. He states, solitude is true only when the self is a desert.
Not exactly a comforting image.
No, this isn't a romanticized solitude. It's a place of torment, where one cannot throw themselves with greed back at men, things, and thoughts, becoming their slave. In this desert, external distractions offer no comfort.
You have to face yourself, alone.
Exactly. Only by enduring this empty, challenging space of inner work, this profound withdrawal from external attachments and illusions, can one's soul become a fruitful field. It's a necessary process of psychological asceticism, of stripping away to find genuine inner resources.
It's also incredibly interesting how he views the role of events, particularly the collective trauma of the war, in creating meaning. He has a very radical stance on where meaning originates.
He does. He asserts that the vision of murder and blood, referring directly to the horrors of WWI, was seen as necessary for renewal. And then comes the truly radical insight. Life does not come from events, but from us. Everything that happens outside has already been.
Wow, meaning comes from us.
That's his point. He continues, with profound philosophical weight. Events signify nothing. They signify only in us. We create the meaning of events. The meaning is and always was artificial. We make it. This emphasizes the subjective, active role of the individual in creating meaning. Rather than passively receiving it from external circumstances or historical events, it's a call to radical responsibility for our internal world.
Finally, after all this inner turmoil and integration, he receives a mysterious gift from the soul, what he calls the black rod of magic. What does this symbolize?
The soul gives Jung a black rod, a mysterious gift that is described as being iron and cold as death, with pearl eyes of the serpent. This rod is not just a symbol, it embodies all the darkness of all former worlds, primordial magic words, and mysterious creative force.
So embracing the dark power within.
It represents embracing the deep, often feared, irrational, and magical power of the unconscious, the very forces that conventional science and rationalism seek to suppress or deny. This entire section illustrates Jung's radical embrace of paradox, the necessity of suffering and confrontation, and the active, often terrifying role of the individual in creating meaning and facilitating psychic transformation. It's the ultimate symbol of accepting the shadow and integrating it as a source of power.
So after this incredible, harrowing, and profoundly transformative journey inward, documented so meticulously in the Red Book, what were the enduring fruits of this deep dive for Jung's work and for psychology as a whole? How did this intensely personal experiment shape his lasting legacy?
Well, the profound self-experimentation documented in Liber Novus led directly to what is arguably his most pivotal theoretical result, the formulation of the individuation process as a temporal account of higher development.
Individuation, that's the core, really.
It became the central thrust of his entire life's work, a roadmap for psychological maturity. It describes the lifelong journey of becoming a whole, integrated individual, distinct from the collective.
Can you elaborate on the key stages or components of this individuation process? It sounds like a complex, multi-layered journey.
Certainly. It involves several crucial stages. It begins with the differentiation of the persona, which is the vital process of consciously separating oneself from one's social roles, the masks we wear, and the expectations of others.
Not just being who others expect you to be.
Right. It's about not identifying solely with how society sees you. Then it moves into reconnecting with the soul, as Jung himself did through the Red Book, engaging with the inner feminine anima or masculine animus principle. This leads to the release of mythological fantasies that emerge from the collective unconscious, which are then integrated into conscious awareness.
Dealing with those deep archetypal images.
Exactly. This process, as Jung noted, involved an adaptation to the inner, which often ran contrary to adaptation to others. He even suggested that true individuation was for the few, those with the courage and psychological capacity to undertake such an inner journey.
Not for everyone, perhaps.
And that those who are insufficiently creative should rather reestablish collective conformity with society. The full elaboration of this complex, lifelong process and its historical and cross-cultural comparison would occupy him for the rest of his life. It became the bedrock of analytical psychology.
It's clear that the Red Book didn't just transform Jung's personal life, but also revolutionized how he, and subsequently analytical psychology, understood visions, intense inner experiences, and even certain psychiatric conditions.
This was a truly radical revision of his earlier stance. Consider this. In 1912, Jung initially considered mythological fantasies, like those he experienced and recorded in the Red Book, as potential signs of loosening phylogenetic layers, essentially, the psyche tapping into ancient, inherited patterns of thought and imagery that, if overwhelming, could indicate the onset of schizophrenia.
So he initially saw them as possibly pathological?
Yes. However, through his intense disciplined self-experimentation with Liber Novus, he radically revised this position. What became critical, he concluded, was not the mere presence of any particular content, whether it was a vision of a demon or a god, but the attitude of the individual toward it, and in particular, whether an individual could accommodate such material in their worldview.
So it wasn't the content itself that was pathological, but one's capacity to engage with and integrate it, rather than being overwhelmed by it. That's a crucial distinction for therapy.
Exactly. This led him to sharply critique psychiatry's incapacity to differentiate religious experience or divine madness from psychopathology, arguing that such material, while not diagnostic in itself, must be viewed carefully with an eye toward its potential meaning and transformative power.
Giving meaning back to these experiences.
Right. He explicitly commented in his afterword to Liber Novus that to a superficial observer the work would seem like madness. It could have become so if he had failed to contain and comprehend the experiences. This shift fundamentally changed how Jung and later analytical psychology approached intense subjective experiences, validating them as potentially meaningful, even profoundly transformative, rather than dismissing them purely as pathological symptoms. It gave dignity to the subjective human experience.
Another cornerstone of his legacy, stemming directly from the Red Book, is the universality of archetypes, particularly visible in the mandalas he meticulously created throughout the book.
Indeed. It's fascinating how cautious Jung was with the Red Book. He actually held it back from publication for decades, partly to avoid any suggestion, meaning he didn't want to inadvertently influence his patients or colleagues with his personal visions, and also to assure himself that these things, mandalas especially, really are produced spontaneously and were not suggested to the patient by my own fantasy.
He needed objective proof, in a way.
He needed external validation. His extensive historical studies, where he found similar patterns across diverse cultures, convinced him that mandalas had been produced in all times and places. He also observed their spontaneous appearance in his patients, who had no prior exposure to his ideas or the Red Book, providing powerful empirical evidence for his theory of archetypes.
And what was their ultimate archetypal significance for him? What did the mandalas symbolize?
He believed the mandala represented one of the best examples of the universality of an archetype. It's a primordial image that spontaneously emerges from the collective unconscious, representing the monad, the fundamental unity, and the microcosmic nature of the soul, mirroring the universe within.
A symbol of wholeness.
Exactly. Crucially, it symbolized the goal of the process, the expression of all paths. For Jung, the mandala became a living symbol of wholeness, the unified self, and the centralizing principle of the individuation process. When someone draws a mandala, it often indicates a movement towards psychic integration.
Jung's experience also led him to a truly radical reconceptualization of the God and man, moving far beyond traditional piety or conventional theological concepts. This seems like one of the most challenging, even controversial aspects of his work for some.
It absolutely is, and it's deeply rooted in his personal experience within the Red Book. Jung's encounter with God was multifaceted and paradoxical, utterly unlike a conventional, benevolent theological concept. He saw God as encompassing all opposites. More than love, he is also hate, and more than beauty, he is also the abomination.
God as hate and abomination, that's confronting.
Deeply. He even said he is more than wisdom, he is also meaninglessness, and more than power, he is also powerlessness. And finally, he is more than omnipresence, he is also my creature. This profoundly personal, lived encounter meant that God was not just an external, static entity, but a dynamic, often terrifying, and paradoxical reality experienced within the human psyche.
And this led to his deeply provocative idea of serving the self as divine service, rather than exclusively serving an external deity.
Precisely. He felt he must free myself from the God, meaning detach from conventional externalized notions of God, and instead serve myself to make his life whole and to realize his unique potential. This service of the self is therefore divine service and the service of mankind.
Serving yourself is serving God and humanity.
That's the radical idea. It challenges traditional notions of worship, external authority, and obedience. The soul also challenges Jung to move beyond merely imitating Christ. She states, you should all become Christs, meaning taking on the way of Christ internally, embarking on a personal journey of self-realization and completing the work of salvation within themselves.
Becoming Christ, not just following Christ.
Exactly. For Jung, Christ is a way, a transformative path, not a static goal or an object of external adoration to be passively imitated. The soul tells him, blessed is the dead one who rests from the completion of his work, implying that Christ can rest when humanity, collectively and individually, takes on his unfinished work of conscious transformation internally.
So it's about a continuing incarnation of the divine in the human soul, a process of ongoing psychological and spiritual evolution.
Exactly. Jung later connected this concept to the continued incarnation of God after Christ in the human soul, seeing the arduous individuation process as the ultimate significance of this divine manifestation. It's a process where humanity actively participates in the unfolding of the divine, rather than just passively observing it or receiving it from external sources. The divine impulse continues to manifest, not just historically, but in each individual's journey toward wholeness and conscious integration of all opposites.
And as we touched on earlier, this journey necessitates the full acceptance of darkness, even what we perceive as evil and what he termed the unlived life. This sounds incredibly challenging for most people.
This is perhaps one of the most confronting and paradoxical lessons from the Red Book.
Yeah.
Jung states bluntly, you are entirely unable to live without evil.
You need evil.
He argues that to dissolve good, which can become rigid, dogmatic, and bind vital life force, leading to psychic stagnation and death, one actually needs evil as a counterforce, a source of dynamic tension and renewal. He adds, if my God were not overpowering, neither would be my evil. This radical idea suggests that true wholeness necessitates courageously confronting and integrating the shadow aspects of oneself, acknowledging that life itself contains these polarities, and denying them only makes them stronger in the unconscious.
So it's tied to the knowledge of good and evil, the very source of humanity's expulsion from paradise, which he seems to suggest is a necessary burden for growth.
He views the knowledge of good and evil not as a simple moral failing, but as an insurmountable curse that withered the tree of paradise. Because once you know it, once you've gained that conscious awareness of duality, you cannot unknow it. Yet, paradoxically, your life needs the dark.
Embrace the darkness.
It's about integration, not denial or repression. This also connects to his concept of steadfastness in great doubt. He states, steadfastness in great doubt is a veritable fire of life, and profoundly, he who cannot bear doubt does not bear himself.
So doubt isn't weakness.
Not necessarily. Doubt, for the psychologically strong and courageous, becomes a sign of strength, a fertile crucible for growth, rather than a weakness to be overcome. It's about being able to say, I have you, to your doubt, embracing it as part of the process.
And what of the concept of the unlived life and how the dead besiege the living to fulfill it? That's a powerful and relatable image.
It is indeed. The dead, as he encounters them in the Red Book, are not just literal spirits, but symbolic of all the unlived potentials, the denied aspects, the dreams deferred, and the unresolved issues from the past, both personal and collective. They besiege the living to fulfill their unlived life.
Our missed opportunities haunt us.
In a symbolic sense, yes. Jung states everything must be fulfilled. This is a powerful call to conscious living, to integrating all aspects of one's potential, to realizing one's unique destiny, and to courageously facing and embodying everything that longs to be expressed within you. Otherwise, these unlived potentials, these dead, will continue to haunt and compel the living unconsciously, demanding attention.
Finally, Jung's extraordinary experience leads him to a unique understanding of magic as a way of living. This seems like a surprising conclusion for a rigorous scientific mind.
It's a deeply nuanced and profound concept. Jung writes, one cannot understand magic. One can only understand what accords with reason. Magic accords with unreason, which one cannot understand.
Magic is unreasonable, basically.
He sees magic not as tricks or superstition, but as a deeper reality, an expression of the incomprehensible forces of the unconscious that operate beyond linear cause and effect. Everything that works magically is incomprehensible, and the incomprehensible often works magically. It's a different kind of logic at play, a logic of synchronicity and meaning.
So it's about accepting a certain profound lawlessness, a mysterious, irrational dimension to life.
Exactly. Magic, for Jung, is a way of living that happens when one realizes a greater other is actually steering the chariot of life, that there are powerful, autonomous forces within the psyche and the cosmos that are beyond conscious control.
Letting go of the reins sometimes.
Yes. One cannot predict magic's effect, as it is lawless in a rational sense. But the condition for its efficacy is that one totally accepts it and does not reject it. This includes embracing qualities one might typically dismiss as stupidity or tastelessness, because even these seemingly negative aspects can contain a magical charge, a vital life force. This acceptance of the irrational, the unpredictable, the absurd is key to accessing a deeper, more profound reality.
And this profound, incredibly intense internal confrontation ultimately led him back to the world, to a new way of engaging with it. It prepared him for the rest of his life's work.
It absolutely did. Jung himself noted that reaching the central point, or Tao, in Liber Novus, the point of ultimate balance and integration, marked the drawing to a close of his intense confrontation with the unconscious. It was the end of a long, arduous psychological battle.
The end of the inner war.
And that conclusion heralded the beginning of his confrontation with the world through lecturing, writing, and engaging with colleagues. He saw these external activities as a form of compensation for the years of inner preoccupation, a way of bringing the wisdom gained from the depths into the collective, shared human experience. The inner work profoundly prepared him to engage with the outer world in a new, more integrated, and deeply influential way.
We've journeyed through Carl Jung's extraordinary inner world, from his early childhood visions and encounters with a living God to the crucible of the Red Book, meeting its enigmatic figures like Philemon, Ka, and the Red One, and grappling with its profound, often unsettling insights into the self, the divine, and the collective human condition.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride. This deep dive has shown us how a deeply personal, harrowing quest for meaning became a foundational contribution to our understanding of the psyche itself.
What's truly remarkable, as we've seen so vividly through Jung's own experience, is the intertwined nature of the personal and the collective. His intense insights into his own inner chaos were powerfully mirrored by the collective chaos and devastation of World War I.
That connection is just undeniable.
Isn't it? His initial fear of personal psychosis was revealed not as individual madness, but as a big dream, a precognition of Europe's fate, underscoring the deep, often terrifying and inescapable connection between the individual psyche and world events. We are not separate from the world we inhabit.
It makes you wonder how much of what we experience individually, our inner struggles and insights, are reflections of something larger, something collective brewing beneath the surface. And that leads us to a final, provocative thought for you, our listener. Something to mull over long after this deep dive ends. Jung's deepest journey, his most profound self-exploration into the Red Book, led him to a challenging and empowering conclusion about responsibility and inner seeking. He wrote, in words that resonate as strongly today as they did a century ago, "There is only one way, and that is your way. There's only one salvation, and that is your salvation. Why are you looking around for help?
Powerful words.
Do you believe that help will come from outside? What is to come is created in you and from you. Hence, look into yourself."
So, we invite you to consider, what does it truly mean for your life to embrace your own unique path, however unconventional or challenging it may seem, to cultivate your inner desert until it becomes a fruitful garden of wisdom and creativity?
And to consciously live out the unlived life, those latent potentials and dreams that beckon from your own depths, rather than allowing them to remain hidden. The deep dive into Jung's Red Book is ultimately an invitation to a deep dive into yourself.
Philozoopia.